Welcome. We're very pleased to have you here to participate in our webinar on program models as a tool for scaling up NSF Includes projects. This is sponsored by the National Institute for Mathematical and Biological Synthesis and the National Institute for STEM Evaluation and Research, both based here at the University of Tennessee. I'm your moderator for this. My name is Louis Gross, and I'm the director of NIMBUS, as we say locally, for the National Institute for Mathematical and Biological Synthesis. And I'm also a faculty member here in ecology and evolutionary biology and mathematics. This presentation is really supported by the National Science Foundation through a grant from the Includes program. And our primary audience for it are principal investigators for NSF Includes projects and those planning to apply either for the current Dear Colleague letter or the Alliance calls, which are, one of which is due soon, but another one will continue. The information that we're presenting could also be of interest to any person in the STEM education field interested in learning more about scaling up their broadening participation projects. To interact today, this is your basic webinar screen. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, you just click on that chat button, which was just highlighted in red, and that will open up a chat window. That window can then allow you to present questions, and you need to decide whether the question is visible to all participants or just to us here as the hosts. And then you simply type your question where it says type here, and your messages will appear in the chat window. I will try to respond to these chats as we go through, but some of the questions will be for our presenters as well, and they will address them at the end of the seminar. The seminar will go for about 45 minutes, and then we'll address any comments and questions at the end. So you will not have audio, we will have audio, but any questions that you have, you should send to us through the chat window. Your presenters today are two excellent individuals with phenomenal background in evaluation. They are Pam Bishop, who is the director of NICER, the National Institute for STEM Evaluation and Research. She here oversees the external evaluation of a wide array of post-secondary STEM education and research projects, including many that are focused on broadening participation. And she's also the Associate Director for STEM Evaluation here at NIMBUS at the National Institute for Mathematical and Biological Synthesis, where she's really developed our center scale model for evaluating the processes and impacts of both the research that goes on here, as well as the education and outreach activities of the center. Our other excellent presenter is Sandra Loray. Sandra is an evaluation associate here with NICER. She's got an extensive background in K through 12 educational evaluation, and actually has been a K through 12 principal, among other things. And her focus in this is certainly on STEM programs. She's served as a STEM education evaluator since 1999. Works very closely with Pam and the other folks here at NICER to collect both quantitative and qualitative data to formatively and summatively evaluate the array of programs in the NICER portfolio. So Pam, it's now going over to you and Sandra.
Thank you, Lou, and thank you all for being here with us today. We're excited to have an opportunity to talk with you about using program models to scale up broadening participation programs like NSF Includes, with the hope that you can take this information and apply it to your STEM education projects. I'll quickly go over our agenda for today. While most of you may be very familiar with NSF Includes, we will start with a quick overview for those of you who are new or perhaps need a quick refresher. We'll cover the basics of collaborative infrastructure, which is the foundation upon which the NSF Includes program is built. Then we will move on to the program modeling piece of the webinar, where Pam will walk you through an example to illustrate how you could model your program, and use this example program to show how you might use program models to set a common agenda for scaling up into a cross-sector collaboration or alliance. And then she'll discuss how you might use another type of model to plan for communication among your partners during the scale-up process. At the end of the presentation, we will take some time to respond to your questions and comments. And finally, we'll end by providing you with information about where you can learn more. So let's get started by providing a quick overview of the NSF Includes program. Includes stands for Inclusion Across the Nation of Communities of Learners of Underrepresented Discoverers in Engineering and Science. It is a comprehensive national initiative designed to enhance U.S. leadership in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM. Discoveries and innovations focused on NSF's commitment to diversity, inclusion, and broadening participation in those fields. Includes is interested in promoting novel approaches to broadening participation by supporting the building of a collaborative infrastructure that will bring people and organizations together who might be working on similar problems from different angles. I'll talk more about what collaborative infrastructure looks like in a moment. Includes has 3 essential components. First, design and development launch pilots, or DDLPs, are the seed projects meant to lay the foundation for scaling up into broader partnerships. There are currently 70 DTLPS funded through the program, each with an aim to broaden participation in a STEM field or fields through experimenting with various change strategies. The hub will be the backbone of support for the program, serving to coordinate communication, alignment of activities, and promote the vision and strategy for the program. Hub solicitations were accepted in November 2017, and the award is expected to be announced in the next few months. Finally, the third component will be the alliances. The program solicitation, 18-529, is currently active with a due date of April 4th. These projects will build on the activities of the DDLPs to leverage the strategies that have shown promise to develop multi-stakeholder partnerships with an aim to build a network based on the foundation of collaborative infrastructure. So what do we mean by collaborative infrastructure? The NSF Includes National Network is designed to foster collaborative infrastructure by promoting these 5 elements: vision, partnerships, goals and metrics, leadership and communication, and the potential for expansion, impact, and scale. I'm going to use these definitions of each of the 5 areas provided by NSF Includes program officers because I want the message to be consistent across all communication platforms about Includes. Every NSF Includes project and the NSF Includes National Network engage a broad community and a shared vision of the importance and power of diversity for scientific innovation. Partnerships and networks are at the heart of the NSF Includes National Network. And through the Coordination Hub, alliances, and the design and development launch pilots, NSF hopes to provide a platform for partnership and collaborative action. Partnerships and networks will operate with shared goals and metrics that allow for robust data that facilitate data-based decision-making. The Includes program is also designed to build capacity for leadership among organizations and individuals to create opportunities in STEM education and careers. And finally, collaborative infrastructure should lead to more partners joining the movement, more connections being made, and a chance for these collaborations to lead to change on a broader scale. So, how this fits into what we are discussing today is that creating a collaborative infrastructure means getting a lot of people on the same page about a lot of different things and using visual models can be a useful tool in this process. I'm going to turn it over to Pam to walk us through some useful visual models you could potentially use when planning to scale up your own projects.
Thank you, Sandra. So I've made a quick list here of some things to keep in mind as I go over the next portion of the webinar. First, the main reason for modeling programs is to surface perspectives of multiple stakeholders so you can get everyone on the same page. Models and maps can be great organizers for both starting and continuing the conversation about how scaling up is going to work for your partnership or alliance. Alliances and partnerships are living systems, which means conditions are constantly changing within them. So you should never think of a program map as a one-and-done situation. The conditions are going to change among your collaborations, and as they change, you should revisit your program models and make changes as well. So what do we mean by program models? Well, a model is a representation of a system that can help us understand how the system is working or how the system is supposed to work. In program evaluation, most of us think of program maps when we think of modeling a system, and you'll hear us use the terms model and maps interchangeably today because of this. Program maps can come in all shapes and sizes, from a simple logic model, which many of you have probably seen, to a more complex theory of change model. But mapping can also take other forms, such as mind maps, networks, or other graphic organizers, such as this map of the evaluation cycle that we use to guide our work here at NICER. Different types of models can be useful for surfacing perspectives on reality in a variety of areas when you're scaling up an initiative. So on the next few slides, we'll take you through a scaling up scenario and show you how modeling various aspects of an initiative can help you and your collaborators work toward developing a common agenda for your collaboration, and also help you think about what your communication strategy is going to look like as you scale up. So first, let's set the context for our example project. A great way to show how a project is supposed to work is a logic model. A logic model is basically a simplified picture of a project. It shows the logical relationships among the resources that are invested, the activities that take place, and the benefits or changes that result. This particular logic model has several parts. The situation is the big picture problem your project seeks to address. Inputs are the resources that you'll invest in your project. Outputs are your activities that involve targeted participants, and they can include, for example, workshops or courses, trainings, or other types of interventions. And your outputs are intended to lead to your specific outcomes. And so outcomes are the direct result or benefit for the people you're reaching in your project. Some examples of this could include changes in knowledge, skill development, or behavior. Outcomes can be short-term, intermediate, or long-term achievements. Goals are broad general statements of what the project intends to accomplish. So here we've created a simple example project that relates to a major issue in broadening participation in STEM. Suppose we're mapping a program we've piloted at our university that's working to bring more women into engineering. The situation we're addressing is that women are underrepresented in engineering. Inputs might be faculty, staff, industry partner, and student time, and also some grant money. Outputs are the activities we'll carry out and who they're going to reach. For example, we'll match female students with female engineering faculty or perhaps engineers in industry for role modeling and mentored research. An example intermediate outcome from this could be that female students understand that women can be successful in engineering. An intermediate goal would be that female students feel a sense of belonging in engineering fields. And we have the long-term goal of increasing recruitment and retention of females in engineering. So, how could this type of map help you scale up a project like this? So we know that large-scale social change comes from better cross-sector coordination rather than isolated interventions of individual organizations. It requires a systematic approach to social impact that focuses on a common agenda. So how could you use these models to help you create a common agenda? Well, suppose you're implementing the project we described on the last slide at your university, and you're interested in developing a cross-sectorial alliance to scale up your impact. You've identified a couple of nonprofits in the area who work with a local school district to get girls interested in engineering. You also have a relationship with an engineering corporation that has an interest in increasing diversity of new hires. So we'll assume that you've all met and decided that you'd like to work together toward the common goal of getting more women and girls into engineering. The first step you might want to take is to map out your common agenda. One way to do this might be to have all the partners create their own logic models, showing what they're doing to move toward this common goal or vision of the alliance. This is an excellent jumping off point for developing a common agenda, which could map the alliance's vision of getting more girls and women into engineering, specific goals such as instilling a sense of belonging in engineering in females at the 6th grade through early undergraduate levels, and also the innovative strategies that your alliance is going to implement to move the needle towards the vision. For example, perhaps we have summer programs for this project coordinated by each nonprofit where female engineering faculty and female engineers from the industry partner work with the targeted populations of girls and women through hands-on projects aimed at solving specific engineering problems. So when thinking about scaling up your own project, using this process can be incredibly useful in getting all of your partners on the same page about where your alliance is heading and how you're planning on getting there. So now we have our common agenda mapped out, but how do we get started organizing the communication system among the partnering organizations across sectors? Well, one way you could do this is by creating a mind map. A mind map is simply a diagram used to visually organize information to show relationships among pieces of the whole. It's often created around a single concept, and in this case, we're going to be talking about communication. Before you make a map, however, you might want to think about key areas that will be included. For instance, in our example, we're going to consider logistics. So how and when will communication happen, and what will the content be? We might consider how we're going to communicate about data collection and analysis across the alliance. We'll want to consider the role of leadership in our communications. For instance, how do we make sure all voices are heard? And since we're scaling up, we'll want to make sure that we address expansion of the alliance and how decisions are going to be made regarding who joins the alliance as we move forward. So now we'll look at a mind map of what our brainstorming session might look like. We would want to take the broad areas that we consider important and map them in our communication plan. For instance, we'll want to make sure that we consider the logistics of communication within our alliance. Key concepts to discuss might include planning for the content of our meetings. We may want to focus on our successes, failures, and any unintended outcomes we may not have thought of. We might want to think about the media we'll use to communicate. Will it be email, video conference, group phone call, or some combination of these? We might want to consider timing. Perhaps we have different timing schedules for different groups that need to communicate. And so with this in mind, you could map out these for the expansion areas, the data areas, and the leadership concepts as well. When you're developing your communication plan, it'll also be important to consider what role the backbone or the support organization would play in facilitating communication among the partners. And when you've thought all of this out, you might end up with a map that looks something like this. So I hope these examples today have given you a glimpse into just some of the ways that modeling and mapping can assist you as you scale up your broadening participation program. A few things I'd like you to remember as you move forward in your own scale-up programs is that visually modeling programs and ideas when scaling up can surface perspectives of various partners and stakeholders. Models and maps are excellent ways to start and continue conversations about how scaling up is going to work. And remember that your alliances are living systems that evolve progressively in the roles and responsibilities of your partners. And as such, models and maps should be revisited frequently to reflect the evolving nature of the alliance.
Thank you, Pam. That was an excellent information to get our audience started in thinking about using program models to scale up their broadening participation programs. We've shared a lot of information with you in a short time. At this point, we'd like to give you the opportunity to ask questions and share any comments you have at this time. Lou has any questions or comments?
Well, I'm going to start with one. And the comment is that this, meaning this presentation, is focusing on interventions. But the NSF includes, has a variety of calls, including for supplemental awards and for eagers that may not involve interventions. So they're for basic research. So does what we've talked about here also apply to those kinds of projects?
Absolutely. So talking about doing basic research, you can model out what that research is going to look like and how it ties into the program models of the different partnerships. Communication is also going to be important, even if you're on-ramping as a center or someone doing research on the project. You'll want to be included in the communication model, and how are you going to get the data from the people that you're wanting to get it from? What are you going to do with the data? How is it going to be shared? How is it going to be fed back to the Alliance so that they can understand how their project is working? And then ultimately, how is that going to be presented to the broader community and the funding agency?
Okay, thanks, Pam. Here's another question. What would be the sort of possible next step after you mind mapped a communication plan?
That's a great question. So what I would do after mind mapping a communication plan is take that and develop a living document that can be shared among the partners so that everyone is clear on the expectations in all of those areas. For instance, the modes of communication for different groups. So you might have a monthly meeting of partner leadership. You might have working groups within the Alliance that are working on specific problems, such as developing curricula or professional development activities or things like that. And they might want to meet on a different schedule using a different media. So what you would want to do is create a document that sort of creates guidelines for how to interact within the Alliance. And that way you can also share that with new partners that start onboarding as you start growing this Alliance.
Okay, here's another question, unless Sandra wants to add something to that comment. This is, why is communication the only area that would need a model?
Well, communication isn't the only area that would need a model. We just picked that one as an example, but you could model other things besides communication. You could model what collaboration is going to look like. So who is going to take on what tasks when, and how that's going to be communicated, and how that's going to look boots on the ground. So what are people actually going to be doing? Who is actually going to be involved? And you could get more granular in that sense than just this broader communication model. So you could certainly map out all types of different aspects of the program moving forward.
I agree. And one thing that I think sometimes gets forgotten is the people, or what we call the stakeholders, that are participating in different portions of the grant project. So there's that research piece, and then there's the evaluation piece, and sometimes you might have, for example, a graduate student, let's just say, that's interacting with data, but may also be in the outreach portion, getting out into the community. And so they have data sources and as terms of their intervention piece, but then they also have a research portion. So being able to map it out visually helps give a representation of where people are within the program itself.
Thanks, Sandra and Pam. This question came in and it has several different pieces. I'm going to read the whole question, and then you may want to address it piece by piece, and I can read it. So you discussed that you must periodically review your model and project because it is a living system. Do you have any advice about how frequently you should review the model or project? Or do you know of any signs or red flags that may arise which should prompt you to review your program? So there's two pieces there. One is how frequently, and another piece is how do you look for signs or red flags of issues involving perhaps a different kind of review?
Okay, yeah, that's actually a really good question, and I'll give you sort of a general answer at first, and that is it depends. It depends on what type of program you're implementing and what the timing is of your activity. So at NICER, we do a lot of post-secondary intervention and STEM education projects, and so we like to revisit on a semester basis. So spring semester, and then the fall or the summer, and then the fall again, and thinking about what's changed in the program and also what's changed in the evaluation and what needs to change. As far as potential red flags, if you are communicating regularly and you have a good communication plan in place, you should be discussing things that are coming up, unanticipated outcomes, whether positive or negative, and you'll want to change your models based on those. And as an example, if you have, say, students going out into high schools, graduate students going out into high schools and, presenting some information or some sort of intervention, and you're finding out that in a certain school it's not working as well, and you want to find out what's going on there, you might want to, do a little investigation and figure out what the difference is between the schools. Is it the student that's going to the schools? Is it the conditions that they're in? Is it the fact that, one school is having the students go out during an assembly and another one's having them come in a targeted class or something of that nature? Or are there faculty members present? Things like that. And then you might want to change your model and your activities or your communication based on that feedback that you've gotten about the program.
I agree. I would say it depends as well. Anytime data is being collected, it's an important time to revisit. And I really like my maps because you can always add in nodes. And so I'd recommend having whatever visual that you have, having that be present in your leadership team meetings and your evaluation meetings, and add in nodes. But if you're looking for a hint of when to be certain to do it, is anytime you're collecting data. So like Pam said, we collect during semesters, and we provide what we call data summaries to the clients that we're working with each time we collect data officially and unofficially, so that we're doing more of a formative assessment of the program. I think when programs wait until the end or just do it annually when the report is due, that's when opportunities are missed.
Great, thank you both. This brings to mind one of the central issues in modeling in science, which is that the scales at which you deal with the results depend very much upon the objectives of the project. And in this case, the time scales do, but presumably the spatial scale too does. If you're dealing with a national project, then you should probably tie in the scale spatially at which you're doing the evaluation to the objectives of the spatial part of that, right? So I've got another question here. So you had, and it really relates to dynamics. So you've really emphasized this iterative and dynamic nature of the process of evaluation. Is there a theory of dynamics in evaluation that people should be aware of regarding includes projects, particularly because these projects are not one-shot, designed to be longer-term issues? So is there any body of theory of how to deal with the dynamics?
So one that I think might fit if you're looking for an official evaluation theory to study, if that's what you're asking, is utilization-focused evaluation, UFE. That's one that comes to mind. So it's really looking at the utilization of your project. So it really fits that, is it working as we go along? And when I think about includes and the different pieces that are coming together, that's one type of evaluation theory that comes to mind. When you have many moving pieces, you want to make sure that it's being utilized in the way in which it was designed. And if it isn't, that you're responsive to those changes, which is what I think we're bringing out in the modeling today.
So you would be able to, if someone on this was interested in more about that, you would be able to.
Yes, Michael
respond.
Quinn Patton, and it's utilization focused evaluation. That's the one that pops in my head.
That's what we use most often at NICER, because it really speaks to getting data into the hands of the decision makers in a timely fashion, only collecting data that is going to be used. And it's a method of continual improvement. And I think it does speak to a lot of the types of projects that we work with, but also, the dynamics of these NSF alliances as they're moving forward, and the way that things are going to be very fluid, and a lot of data needs to be collected from a lot of people at a lot of different times and shared and used to make real-time decisions moving forward. And that's what utilization-focused evaluation really focuses on that.
And there's one more that just popped into my head. It's not really, it would be just interesting to look at, I think, is valuing an evaluation, because we're talking about, and includes being culturally responsive to the populations we're working with. And Ernest House talks a lot about valuing an evaluation in education programs. So that might be someone else that's worth looking into. A lot of evaluation work in education programs, and fits nicely with Michael Quinn Patton and utilization focused evaluation.
So there's a sort of big question that we could probably spend the rest of the time on, but this question is really, what's the difference between a logic model and a theory of change model?
The big question. So there are a lot of different answers to that, but the general answer is that a logic model is a much more basic program model that is showing the different areas of the project. So you have, a block of inputs, a block of activities, a block of participants, and then some overall sort of goals and outcomes. And it doesn't show the causal pathways. And that's the big difference between a logic model and a theory of change model, at least in the way we think of it in NICER, is that if we're really digging into a program and what all of the components are going to look like and how each of the components is going to connect to the next. So what the big challenges are, and what activities are you going to do to address those challenges, and who are you going to do them with? And then once you do the activities with those participants, what are the intermediate outcomes that you're expecting from that particular activity? And show you have more of a causal pathway for each element of the project when you use a theory of change model. Whereas a logic model is sort of a more basic, here's the big picture of the program, what we think is going to happen. And oftentimes, the reason I use a logic model is because it tends to be easier, we found at NICER, when we're working with folks who aren't familiar with modeling programs. It's easier for them to wrap their head around how a logic model works than it is to create this really intricate theory of change model that we often use on the evaluation side of things to see how things are going.
All right. Sandra, anything else you want to add on that?
I always think of it kind of like an after-school reading program. So say you have students that are going to stay after school and read. And a logic model would show that the activity we're going to do is have this after-school reading program, and that we expect students' reading scores to improve. But it doesn't get at the when that change happens or why. So if we did that as a theory of change model, it might be looking at when the change occurs. Is it for students that go 2 days a week, 3 days a week? So it gets to those finer points that Pam was mentioning about threading those change times together. It's a more intricate picture.
Okay. Is there a mapping tool or software that you would particularly recommend, or is there a place that people could go to compare? Or is there a paper on this?
What a great idea.
I mean, yeah, so there are, I think, lots of papers about logic modeling. There's a really great website is Extension Wisconsin.
Yes.
University of Wisconsin
Yes.
Extension has a really great website on logic modeling, and they have templates and they have examples and they have things that you can download and use and share with your collaborators. So as far as logic models, there's that, and then there are also free online theory of change. There's actually theoryofchange.org, where you can create a theory of change map and you can share it with folks. There are lots of mind mapping tools online. A lot of that is used by teachers in K-12. So there are a lot of free resources. If you just do a browser search for mind mapping, you can come up with lots of free resources for that. The one that we created and shared here in our presentation today was just created in PowerPoint. I used shapes and arrows and just sort of stuck things in there together and moved them around as I needed. So there are lots of different ways you can do it. And certainly PowerPoint is actually a pretty useful tool and most people know how to use it. So that's also a great way to map things out.
And Pam, you are much more adept at PowerPoint than I am. I know that.
We use it a lot.
So this is a comment from someone. So this person says that they would prefer a causal model and that the logic models seem too basic. Mm-hmm. They seem not to include so many relevant details.
Mm-hmm. And that is a good point. And again, that's the difference between the two. You know, what you're giving up with one, you're gaining with the other. You're gaining simplicity with a logic model, but you're losing a lot of the detail on the theory of change model, which can be a pro or a con depending on who you're working with and their comfort level with these things. So they both have their uses. We prefer theory of change models as well on the evaluation side because it gives us more information so that we can really dig into what the program is trying to do.
So with regard to the graphing issues, how do you encourage people to stick to the sort of some basic rules of modeling in that a certain shape always sort of conveys the same thing? Okay, so lots of people are using models and just seeing, they see it as a drawing exercise and they use any old shape to mean any old thing. Now, of course, there is a formal field of system dynamics in which the shapes mean something, but I'm not sure that those rules apply in evaluation.
Right. Well, and probably, nonprofit folks that you're dealing with or industry people, if you have partners in those areas, probably wouldn't be aware of that either. So my suggestion there, and maybe Sandra can chime in on this afterwards, is that this is a collaborative process. And so so for a logic model, you could say, hey, here's a template, here's an example. Could you all fill this out according to what you think you're doing to reach this common goal? And then we'll get together and discuss. So that one's a little bit more simple. When you're talking about, mapping out and using different shapes for mind maps and things like that, that needs to happen collaboratively. So if you need to be in the room with people doing this, and then you're deciding as you move forward, okay, this is going to mean this, and this shape will be for this, and things like that. So that is a little bit more of a collaborative process than just having a template for that sort of thing.
I agree.
Anything to add to that?
And then presumably then in communicating that map to the variety of stakeholders, you would have to reinforce. I've found this in displaying any model, I have to come back and reinforce what each component means, because people have forgotten that a rectangle means this and a diamond means this.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
So some sort of legend. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was working on a mixed methods project recently this past summer, and I didn't know that in mixed methods research, in that language of social science there, that you used a square and capital letters for certain things, and that a circle was when you were integrating data. So I learned that, and it wasn't hostile or anything. It was just know your audience. And like Pam was saying, when I got in the room with them and talked about the research we were doing, and I said, I had modeled it out a certain way with arrows, which is typically how I do it. And they said, can we make that a circle? Because anytime we integrate data, we use a circle. And so we made them circles. So it depends on your audience. Yeah.
So an iterative feedback
Yes.
component to building those mind maps too.
Yeah.
So we've come to the end of the questions that have been posted, and I know that you've got another slide or two to tell people how to learn more.
Sure. Thanks, Lou.
So if we've piqued your interest today, here are a few ways you can learn more. You can visit our Includes conference website here, where we have registration links for our upcoming webinars. You can visit the NICER website and please follow us on Facebook and Twitter for real-time evaluation information. And if you're so inclined to tweet about today's experience, our Twitter hashtag is NICEReval. And finally, contact us. Pam and I are available to answer questions about today's webinar, and the NICER team is available for collaboration on future STEM evaluation projects. As a reminder, or STEM education projects, I should say. As a reminder, we'll send an email with a link to our presentation today. And please also look for an evaluation survey about the webinar and fill that out. We really do appreciate your feedback.
And thank you. We'll end on that.